Margaret, can you hear me? Margaret, can you hear me? This is a test. No, you can't hear it? Hmm? Well, let's see if this isn't. Is that better? Oh, now it's feedback. Okay. So- No, no, didn't you hear the feedback? That's good. All right, that's good. Okay, well, welcome to the second Residents Association quarterly meeting. We are calling the meeting to order at 3 o'clock. First order of business, I was sort of reminded that my directions last time was, you know what happens if we have an alarm, everybody sit still. And then if they say to leave, you follow the leader. They said, no, the leader has to stay and make sure everybody's out. So I'm going to read you the instructions. All right, it's boring, yes. If the alarm's activated, please stay still. I will determine what is happening. And if we have to initiate a evacuation, please exit the room immediately if you're capable. If you need assistance, I will arrange that. And then when everybody else is out, then I get to leave. So now I know what the captain of the Titanic felt like. Okay. So, and then I'll close the doors and we'll go on with it. Okay, this morning or this afternoon, we are going to have a session that was sort of started at the last one. I just want to kind of update everybody with some news for marketing. Last time we were here, we had 5 new guests or 5 new residents. As of this morning, we have 15 new residents year to date since the beginning of the year to date. And we are also, the waiting list is now up to 59. So that's us of this morning. So it's important to know that we're doing things right. So first, I would like to do a little bit of introduction. If the 2023 Residents Council members would please stand. This is your council. A couple of them are on vacation and unable to attend. They've been serving you this half a year. Thank you. And then our distinguished guests this afternoon, Dick Berry and Ray Smith, who are your resident directors on the Woodland Pond Board. So please, a round of applause for these gentlemen. And at this meeting, we will also hear from the chair of the Road Committee, Rewarding Our Valued Employees, Suzanne Ostrowski. Okay. All right. So this is why we have the meetings. We're required by our bylaws to do this 4 times a year. We will have an annual meeting in October, and I guess while I'm at that point, our next meeting will be September 27th here, 3 o'clock. Subject matter is under development. And then our annual meeting of the Residents Association will occur October 25th, 3 o'clock here in the PAC. Okay, so I think if you haven't heard Michelle's latest talk, she did say it last week, and she did remind you yesterday in her conference with everybody that this is going to be about the board. Well, I want to be sure that people understand it's not this board. This board is being laid in the basement for the Woodland Pond Ark. Because of all this rain, I'm sure we're going to need it. So if that's what you're expecting, take a yawn. But also, this is the other board. We don't want you to be that way. So today's discussion is on the Woodland Pond Board. And our agenda is basically to go through why the board, and we will end up with an update from Rove. And if you can, please contain yourself. If you get very excited, you remember the last time we had the Jeffrey move. And if you can, please, we'll have all time for all kinds of questions and answers. So let's us go through the process. Okay, this is a discussion on what is the Woodland Pond Board. And basically, this is what's in the bylaws, tells us how the board works and functions. There are a couple things that, this may be a bit of a reading class for you, but there are a couple key things that we need to know. First, that one of the big things is that Woodland Pond must be in compliance with all the regulations. I saw that and I got thinking, what do they mean? So I developed this. These are 90, I think this is the tip of the iceberg of what we have to do to run Woodland Pond Incorporated and to be a CCRC. These are basically, these come out of the certificate of incorporation. This tells us what we can do. There's also county and municipality regulations that I couldn't get a hold of. But you can see that all kinds of things. The nonprofit have very strict rules on what you can and cannot do. The Department of Health, the Article 46, dictates what the CCRC is capable of engaging in. Social services and the public health have inputs to us. So anytime we try to do something or things need to be looked at, these are some of the processes. And one thing that really impressed me is if there is a change to the way Woodland Ponds Board wants activities to take place, they basically have to get an approval from the Office of the Attorney General. So this is very structured, very well-regulated corporation that's running our life here at Woodland Pond. Of course, the IRS has their little say in things. I'm losing my grip on things. Okay, from the board of directors. Am I still, okay. Oh, come on. Let me do it this way. Okay, the board of directors, this is from the give me a second, from the bylaws, the sections of powers. Yeah, I gotta put it on my ear. Sorry, folks. Okay. Anyway, this describes the powers that the board has and the number of directors, which is important to know. But the real thing to know what the board is, they have the general power to control and manage the affairs of Woodland Pond, of the corporation. And that's what we belong to. Okay. And also they have the powers to conduct meetings and the conduct of meetings and the management of the corporation. Very important information on that. This is the board. This is the directors of the board. Chris Doran, Dean Llewellyn, Mike Zeiler, and of course, Dick Berry. These make up the executive officers of the board. and they have very strong, very powerful responsibilities taking care of us. And then the board members made up of these 7 individuals. And of course, you see our resident director, Ray. I was doing this, I looked at it and I got thinking, when you do, you sign on and they want you to do a security check and they say, are you a robot? And they say, you say no, and it comes up, can you pick the crosswalk or can you pick the lights? I was thinking this one, can you pick the resident? Yes, but yes, but again, excellent people. So one of the things I wanted to show you is why are they on our board? Their experience, the expertise that they bring to the board is very important. This information and all of the information that I'm sharing this afternoon you can get by just walking down the hall to the library. It's in the library, all of this. None of this I got anywhere else, library and the website. So this is my interpretation of some of the skills that the board has. They're covering things. Many have been on a board, many are on a board. A lot of them have been CEOs. 2 of them are still CEOs, presidents of their companies that they're running. Through particularly the financial services programs and public sector doing trusts and local initiatives, and then the health planning process. So this is the composition of the talent that you just saw those pictures of the board. Now, what is the board? How is it made up? Basically, the structure of the board is it's in 2 groups. It's the committees of the board. They never change. This is what really the board uses to run themselves. And then the committees of the corporation, which are formed to help guide and make sure that we are aligning ourselves to our mission, vision, and values. So there's an executive group, an executive committee, it's finance and audit, the governance, and then quality and improvement, compliance, and strategic planning. I think Michelle mentioned something about strategic planning yesterday in her discussions as a result of the thing. These are the chairs that are on those. So let's break it down a little bit more. Okay, the executive committee is made up of Chris Doran. He is on all of the committees of the executive, or the committees of the board as being board chair. Mike is the board vice chair. Dick is our secretary for the corporation. You'll see his name with the minutes in the library. And Dean Llewellyn is the board treasurer. The Finance and Audit Committee, Dean again is the chair. And then under governance, this is what I would, and I know they're probably shaking their boots, but what I call HR. This is what they do for the staffing or getting board members for our company. So I will give you a little bit more detail on that. So these are what happens at the executive committee level. And it's really, it would have been pages and pages of what the executive committee does. So what I tried to do is look at what can't they do? what are they not allowed to do? So that's a list of some of the things they're not allowed to do as an executive committee. That's part of the board, and they work with that. Finance and audit, again, they look at ensuring that we're following the appropriate processes, the GAP, general accepted practices and finance and financial reporting. And then, as I say, the governance group is to basically find and make sure that our board members are what we need to comply with and project our things. One of the things that I found was that boards purpose, one of the purposes is to define what the purpose and goals is. And that's one way of making sure that we are doing activities that align with our mission. The other is, and this is important, is they need to select and evaluate the organization's top leader and provide guidance and support to ensure that leader is effectively managing the business. So if you wanted a Cliff's note, real quick one, that's it. This is what they do for us. And the recipient, of course, as you know, is our president and CEO, Michelle. Okay, the committees of the corporation. This is the groups. Here you see they're now drawing in the management staff under the quality improvement and compliance with Michelle, Christy, Bridget, and Phil as part of their committee. And then under strategic planning, they have two subsections. One is the Internet Committee, Internet Technology, which we all survive with and live with, and the expansion planning, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But again, this is how the board of Woodland Pond Incorporated is structured. So if you think about, if they start talking about something, it's one of these groups that's taken and they bring it over to us. Whoops, fat fingered. Okay, I wanted to get to this. Again, a lot of information, but as you can see, the roles are very much the word compliance, evaluating, making sure we are performing and not disrupting and being outside the bounds of all of those statutes and laws that I showed before. The expansion planning is a new one that was initiated by the board early in 2020. It was, purpose really was, as it says, to identify how we improve here, improve the structure of Woodland Pond now, and then also look at the other expansions. This task force looked at the development of the 6 new cottages. So it's all part of the plan to go through that and analyze what takes place. Okay, internet technology, obviously, it's an important aspect. We have an awful lot of information that we need to protect. It could be a subject for another presentation, but at this point, just say we are very, very well protected. At the recent few months ago, we had an excellent presentation on cyber technology techniques that we're using here at Woodland Pond. to the Financial Review Committee. Okay. This is the point where I wanted to turn the presentation over to our two resident directors. And from what I can tell, what I've been told is the fact that we as residents in Woodland Pond have directors on the board is quite unique. I can't say for sure we're the only one, but I've not seen it mentioned in any other of the CCRCs in New York that we do that. So the original intent was that the board was going to have the retreat today and tomorrow, but they had to reschedule it. And so it was last week. But fortunately, we have our two directors. And I would just basically ask if you would share with the audience, share with the community, because we're retaping this, your experience as to being on the board and how you see that as a benefit for Woodland Pond. Yeah, either one. You need to turn it on though, Dick. No, no. Up.
Obviously, I'm not on the technology committee. You notice that. Okay? Yeah. Okay. First, I want to point out that that picture was taken 7 years ago when I was 65 pounds heavier. So thank you very much. It has been, I know I speak for Ray. I know I do, because he's not just my very highly respected colleague, but he's my dear friend as well. And it's been an honor and a privilege to serve on this board for the last 7 years, as is mentioned there. This has been, I have, in the course of my professional life, I served on a good number of boards. And I can tell you honestly that this has been the most unique board that I have ever served on. And it's unique in the sense that there are no cliques, there are no personalities that have an endless urge to emerge and be a star. Everybody is interested in giving their perspective, in listening to other board members, and then arriving at a consensus. Nobody perseverates, nobody tries to hog the spotlight. It's really been such a productive board. And one other aspect of our board productivity, I think really we've got to give a tremendous amount of credit to Michelle. She talks about transparency a great deal, but she really practices that, especially with the board. She keeps us informed of everything. Consequently, there are no surprises in regards to the community and the board, because we've always been informed by Michelle exactly what is taking place within the community and what is arising in terms of any potential issues or problems or concerns that we can be familiar, should be familiar with, and possibly give her our counsel and advice in addressing. So Ray, do you want to, I've spoken enough? You said.
I think one of the things that it's important to remember is that Michelle manages this place. The board does not manage the place. The board, the primary role of the board is to hire, fire, and evaluate the president and CEO of Woodland Pond. So we selected Michelle to manage and run Woodland Pond, and that's what she does. We simply oversee how she does that. As Dick says, she's completely transparent. She keeps us informed. She does not get in front of things that we would be unaware of. The other thing that I think you should know is Woodland Pond has no equity, which a normal corporation has. Woodland Pond was financed in, I guess, 2002, entirely with municipal bonds, a total of $117 million worth of bonds. The municipal bonds have been paid down now to about 71 million. And what sort of passes for equity is the amount of money in refundable entrance fees, which now totals about $48 million. The most important thing about a CCRC is as soon as it opens to try to get full, and then once it's open to stay full. And our team of Shannon and Courtly has been hugely successful in keeping this place full. We're the only CCRC in New York State that is anywhere near us, and as far as the occupancy, most of them are 85% or lower. And also, Tom mentioned the question about having residents on the board. All of the Kendall CCRCs have residents on the board. And there's one or two Kendalls here in New York State. The important thing is that, or to me, the important thing is the residents on our board are selected by the Residents' Council. They're not appointed by Michelle or the board. The Residents' Council, when we were elected, the Residents' Council proposed us to the then board. They interviewed us and other people, and they selected Dick and me.
Let me interject here that in addition to having residents on our council, we are one of the rare CCRCs that our bylaws give full voting rights to the residents on the council. So there are other CCRCs that do have, they're not in the majority, but there are CCRCs that do have some residents on their board, but they are not voting residents. We have full voting privileges on this board of directors. When we were first elected to the board, I found for the first 6 months, one of the biggest challenges for me was that it was for the residents to really adjust to the fact that I was not the complaint department. That, Dick, I didn't like my spaghetti the other night. It didn't turn out too well, and there's too much salt in the hamburger, and I went on and on. And especially because I'm a Navy man, and Ray was in the service as well. So we believe in the chain of command. And with the chain of command, you have to go to the people who are responsible for whatever it is that you feel you have a legitimate concern. But you don't go to a resident board member. That was one thing that took a good number of months for me to adjust to in terms of explaining to people that was not my role. Did you want to add anything else? I mean, we can talk a lot about it.
No,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. to shut up, so I'll shut up.
Well, I guess that means I've got to start talking. But no, again, it is a unique opportunity to have us go through this. When I moved in, I thought, what's this board? And I heard about it, hadn't seen it. And so we wanted to bring it to life here today. And again, if you're have any interest or any curiosity about it, the documents that govern it are dry, but they're there in the library. And thank you, librarians, for keeping it up to date. So what we can do at this point, I will say thank you, gentlemen. Please stay. We're going to do a quick interlude on Rove. Suzanne? Q&A is coming. Yeah. See? Q&A after that. Come on.
Thank you, Tom. When Tom called how many months ago to ask me if I would do this, I said yes. Obviously, I'm here. But I know many of you have heard this story before. Some of you who may be new residents might not have. So how can we make it a little more exciting, interesting? And going through my notes, I came across this 5-page document giving the history of Rove. However, before I go any further, I would like my Rove members to please stand. Not here. She's in Chautauqua. That's Jill Ortner. But I found this very fascinating. Now, Woodland Pond opened in September of 2009. In November 18th of 2009, the Committee for the Holiday Fund met. Now, this is November 18th. The residents on that committee had been living here for 2 months or less. And they got together for what they called the Holiday Fund, hoping they could get some donations from people to give to the staff due to our no tipping policy. One name stood out to me, and that was Ann Hanover. She was on that original committee. And she's not here today. She's playing Mahjong. Anybody who knows Ann Hanover knows she plays Mahjong on Wednesdays. So I did talk to her, and she said, yes, they got together. They weren't at all sure anyone would donate anything. Remember, they'd lived here 2 months or less. However, by December 9th, they had received $4,930 from 32 residents. The place was mostly empty then. So 32 residents. I have no idea what percentage of the residents that is, but obviously they did a nice job for 32 residents to donate $4,000. That's almost $5,000. The checks were given to the staff on December 18th, directly presented to the staff from the committee. Joan Mandy, a while ago, who was a resident at that time, told me a story about when those checks were distributed, and I would like her to relate that story to you, please.
As she said, there weren't very many members and there weren't that many workers, to be honest with you. So we did get, can you hear me?
Point.
Can you hear? Here, Sue, show me. You can tell, you know.
Like an ice cream cone.
Okay,
There we go.
there were not that many residents, but there weren't that many workers either. And I happened to have a house cleaner. She was a young woman, a single mom, and she had a 4-year-old daughter. And they got their checks and my doorbell rang and she came in and she was crying. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she grabbed me and she thanked me. And I looked at her and she said, "My check here pays my rent and some food." But she said, "No way could I have a Christmas. And now I have money to give my 4-year-old daughter a couple Christmas gifts." I'm crying at this point. She's got me upset. But anyhow, that was the start of it. So think about it when you're paying. There's still people like that have probably many problems financially. There are a lot of people that are making good salaries and they're getting the check. But the one I'm thinking about would be somebody like her. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Well, the Holiday Fund eventually became the Employee Appreciation Fund. Initially, only residents in the initial and independent living donated, and only staff members working in independent living received a check. The director of the health center at that time, November 10, 2010, we're up to now, Karen Zobel, thought that not including the staff in the health center was going to be very divisive and discourage people from wanting to work in the health center. So the donations then became extended to hourly employees also in the health center. Remember, some of our employees work both sides. That would have even been harder. So we've also now are requesting donations from the health center. Now, fast forward to 2021. The word fund in the name, Employee Appreciation Fund, caused a great deal of confusion with other funds. We have the Woodland Pond Benefit Fund. During COVID, we also had the Employee Benefit Fund. And people would say, "But I already gave to that fund." Well, no, they didn't give to our fund. They gave to some other fund and got confused. So we changed our name to ROVE, which is Reward Our Valued Employees. And the confusion, it has ceased on that. Now, who gets the checks? All active hourly employees who have been employed here for at least 30 days will receive a check. That includes part-time and per diem. The checks are distributed, I believe, the first paycheck in December. Now, where does the money come from? Most of it comes from you. There are two ways residents can contribute. One is by a check any time during the year. Most of them come in September, some come in October. We like to have all the donations in by September 30 because it's a lot of calculations to figure out who worked, how many hours, and how much per hour they all get. And Bridget Blum is very much a part of that. The second way to donate, and this is the way we prefer because it makes our bookkeeping easier, is to have an amount added to your monthly statement. That amount would be added February through November. And it will be, you'll see it on your statement. And then we get that amount monthly from those people who donate that way. And that really is our preferred way. I think Bob would agree with that when he's over there nodding his head. He's our treasurer, the numbers man, and he does a phenomenal job. In January, when you get your monthly statement, there's a form included in there that allows you to select which way you're going to pay. That's why nothing is taken out in January, because nobody has yet turned the form in. Then in December, the checks have gone out, so nothing will be added to your statement in December either. So the 10 months, February through November is when that amount would be added to your statement. Now, we do make a suggested amount of $1,000 a year, or for the residents electing to have the amount added to their statement, it would be $100 a month. And people, of course, paying by one check, whatever you give. Now, that being said, any amount you feel you can afford will be greatly appreciated. And that is a suggested amount only. Ann told me also back when they had the holiday fund, when residents donated their money, they were given a written receipt for what they paid. That means everybody on the committee knew who paid and how much. We don't do it that way. All of your donations are totally confidential. Only Bob, who receives the checks and deposits them in our account at Sawyer Saving, is the only one. He does not share that information with us. Okay, now why should you donate? Now, when you go to a restaurant, you leave a tip for your server. When you take a taxi ride, you tip the driver. When you stay in a hotel, you leave a tip for the cleaning staff. And that list can go on for quite a bit yet. Now, our staff, our hourly employees here at Woodland Pond perform all of those services. They do it with care. They do it with patience for those of us that sometimes get grumpy. And they always do it with a smile. We can't tip them. There's no way we can say, thank you for your service, except through Rove. That is a way you can say thank you. So it's our way of showing appreciation by saying, giving a check will go to reward our valued employees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Lionel?
Wait. Yeah, you-
The yearly donation that we give in lieu of tips. Okay. Now, the employee who works and leaves in the middle of the year, he deserved the tips for the time he was working, but he doesn't get them.
That is correct. We have our own regulations, and this was worked out with Bridget. And the current requirement is the employee must be currently employed. Now, fair or not, that's for you to decide. Rules can be changed. Right now, that is the rule we have. And I know some employees come and go, and we don't even know who they are. We don't know even how many have left prior to the payout. But we do know that if all of them got part of the pot would be diluted for those who are still here. So that is the reason right now that we will give a check only to the people who are currently employed. Did that answer your question?
The money is for the tips for the work they did, not for, for nothing else. It's in lieu of the tips for the work they did. And if they leave, they still had done that work.
You're absolutely correct. They've done the work. But until that regulation is changed, that is the way it's going to continue to be. Well,
Okay, let me step in. Yes, just a minute, Mark. Yeah. Please come to the Rove meeting, which is,
Yeah.
when do you have it?
second Monday of the month in the classroom, not in the
Right.
classroom, in the game room. And you're welcome to attend.
Yeah, and develop a dialogue there. This is not the form for that. Okay, I have switched the, whoops. Oh,
If you have money taken out or you pay monthly, but you feel at the end of the year you want to write a check, can you?
Absolutely. We will never say no to a donation. Oh, and one more way that we do get money, occasionally a relative of someone who is deceased will give us a memorial donation. Is that what you're going to say, Bob? Yeah. Oh, okay.
That Human Resources can handle that. And she's already worked out the numbers.
Oh, okay,
And,
very good. That's good to know.
And many of those checks do come in at the end of November, last minute. But we'd like them a lot earlier. As you
Yes.
said, we like them by the end of January.
No,
or
and September.
Excuse me, September. Yeah.
all right, thank you.
Any other questions?
No,
What is the amount of area they have at Woodland Pond? Is there room for much expansion?
That-
are you,
That I think you'd have to ask
yeah,
Tom and the board. That has nothing to do with Rove.
it's on Rove. Okay. All right. Okay, let's do this. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. No, well,
Is
Okay,
the
we're
money
gonna-
we give to Rove tax deductible?
no,
No.
it's a gift. Okay, so I got my own here. We'll open the floor to questions on the whole presentation, but the board. I see Pat, you had your hand up before. Yeah,
I understand the board is responsible for the director and CEO of Woodland Pond, period. That's the only staff that you're really concerned with. The rest of the residents, or the rest of the staff is her responsibility. Now, my question to you is, in the event that something occurred that Michelle was unable to serve temporarily or permanently, is the board in a position to make a temporary or a permanent assignment to replace her?
The answer to that in one word is yes. We've already dealt with that
So
to everyone's satisfaction.
we're fixed in the event that something undesirable happened. Yes, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I wanted to thank both of you for being on the board. I have a couple of questions. The first one is related to what was just asked about. I'd like each of you to maybe just think or tell us about a particular example of how you've represented our point of view on the board.
I'd be very happy, and that's a very important question. So I'll take it first, and then you can tell me to shut up, and you can take it. I think I was probably on the board for no more than about maybe 2 or 3 months. And the topic came up about staffing and the turnover in our staff. And I raised the point with the other board members that they had to understand that for the residents here, myself included, we had a strong relationship with staff members. And very often we developed emotional ties with them, so that this wasn't just a passing parade of employees and, oh yeah, Joe's gone and now Sally's gone and well, goodbye and who's new. That this to us could be very, very significant in terms of our morale and the way we responded when people whom we were very fond of suddenly, for whatever reasons, going back to college or going to college, or for whatever the reasons were, they departed. Now I'd like to turn that around to make a very, very important point. because when you're on the board, your first loyalty is to the board. And I want to distinguish what's meant by that in terms of being a resident, but you have a loyalty to the board. Say that there's an issue where the board feels that for the general welfare of Woodland Pond, for the continuing benefit of Woodland Pond, it's necessary to raise the maintenance fee by whatever amount. Now, certainly that isn't to my benefit, it isn't to your benefit, but this is where my loyalty to the board has to supersede my own interests or the interests of my neighbors and friends whom I've been associated with for 12 years. And does that distinguish for you
It
that
distinguishes, but I'm still waiting for an example of one example of how the board has listened to you, representing our point of view.
We don't represent your point of view in particular. We represent the entirety of the operation. We represent the residents, we represent the staff, we represent basically the community, how this operation affects everything. Yeah, bondholders too.
Yeah, second question, what is a succession plan? Succession plan.
There is a succession
Succession.
plan, but we are not able to share it.
I'd like to ask Jeffrey's question in a slightly different way. Since there are a lot of CCRCs that don't have resident members, and of those that do, some of them don't have voting resident members, I would like to know how you think this board would operate any differently if the two of you were not there.
well, they wouldn't be as smart.
Positions.
But I still feel that there are many opportunities for myself as a resident to enlighten the other currently, well, it was 10, but now it's 9 board members who are not residents as to a resident perspective. And I think this is an important aspect. I find it to be an aspect that I've felt good about contributing during the 7 years of my tenure. You know, we're living here. This is our home. This is where I want to spend the rest of my life, and therefore I have a truly the most intensely vested interest that any board member could possibly have. And even in our current considerations of expansion, you know, I'm more on the conservative side because, again, I feel that this is something that we want to approach with relative concern about possibilities for things to not be quite as we project them. And that's very important as far as neither Ray nor I are really, we've been very active on the board, as you could see if you looked at all those committees and the work that we do. And I should add that even though I'm the corresponding secretary on the board, on all the committees that Ray serves on, he also acts as the acting secretary and takes the minutes on those committees as well. So I think that it adds an entirely different flavor aspect to the board to have us there to just remind them what life on a day-to-day basis in Woodland Pond is. And many people join out of the goodness of their heart, but they're not that familiar with CCRCs, and they're not that familiar with a senior community. So this is I think, a very valid aspect that we can add to the role of a board member.
The other thing is that because we are residents and because the other board members are doing us a huge favor to actually serve on our board. This is to most people on the outside, this is a highly select community of people that are fairly well off. There are other boards they could perhaps be of greater value to. So Dick and I try to do most of or more work than basically one person is entitled to make it easier for these other folks to stay on the board. And while I'm talking about that, as Tom pointed out, the board is now down to 11 board members. We can have a total of 18 and a minimum of 9. And the governance committee is always on the lookout for new board members. So if any of you have any ideas of people that would be good board members, we'd like to know about it.
I have a question. As residents, are there any aspects of board business that you are excluded from participating in? In other words, your vested interest makes you ineligible to participate in these discussions. What would those subjects be?
Yes, there's one particular aspect. Even though I'm a member and have been for 7 years a member of the executive committee, I have to excuse myself when it comes to evaluating Michelle, because that is felt would be a great conflict. If every time that as a resident, that I'm making any kind of expressing a concern to Michelle or asking for something, if I were to say, I vote for you, and that's just considered, and I happen to feel that that's true, I would not want to exercise that authority in evaluating her. We have 9 other very, very competent people at the present time to do that. So 9 other, yeah. So that is the one aspect, the one limitation to any resident who serves on the board and who happens to also be on the executive committee.
You have both mentioned expansion and strategic planning, and I wonder what else you can tell us in terms of ideas about expansion beyond building 3 new duplexes and where we might expand to.
Well, prior to COVID, for every year that I was on the board, either Michelle or I attended a national convention, and we came back. Many of you who were here for the number of years may recall that I would make presentations to the community coming back from these conferences. I went to 2 national conferences, and then I reported to you on the highlights of those conferences. But prior to COVID, there was a great thrust within the national CCRCs to extend their services to the homes of senior citizens. So senior citizens who were reluctant to come to a community, they didn't want to leave their homes. There was a thrust to you could sign up for almost like a life care policy as we have, but it would be provided for you mostly in the home. But of course, with COVID, that changed completely, and personnel were severely limited, and it's now since sort of gone with the wind. But in terms of other expansion, we're certainly looking at how we could well, we've already gotten our 3 new duplex cottages up and in the works, and we're now looking at other options such as that. In terms of, well, no, I mean, because you see, this is still in the planning stage. That's why we're just looking around in the community to see what's available, and even in terms of property, in terms of any kind of a possible development. But it's in the most rudimentary planning stage. The thing about property, we say we have 82 or 84 acres, but all those acres are watershed, and we can't utilize them. But that's so true of many of the properties that surround us. We just have a lot of watershed properties, and that's a great restriction on any kind of even planning.
Since I'm on the committee, the expansion planning committee, the biggest inhibitor is staffing. It's very hard to find competent staff for anything, even here.
Okay, take a question from the back.
Hi. Comments you made, Ray, about the composition of the board and what they may or may not bring to a membership on the board has me thinking. I've served on a few boards in my time, and I think it's fair to say that in each case, I brought some kind of expertise or experience to that board that made sense for me to be a member. And from what you said, Ray, it sounds to me as if that sort of experience may be lacking. And I'm wondering what criteria are used by the board to fill its ranks.
The biggest problem is to be honest with you, getting anybody. But we certainly have some gaps now. We would love to find some medical practitioner who had geriatric experience, for example. That's probably the biggest lack.
Okay, good question. Okay, let's take one or two more questions. Yeah.
Communicating.
Here. Well, talk to her, don't talk to me.
Thank you, Lionel. I'm on the same track. Obviously, we all laughed, Dick, when you talked about how at the very beginning, some resident was complaining about the spaghetti dinner. But we have a very talented community here, and I'm wondering if someone does have a really well thought out or an interesting or a provocative question or idea or something they would like to ask the board or propose. What is the mechanism? Do we go to the resident council? Do we contact you? What is the mechanism to have our voices heard?
I think your answer was contained in the question as you posed it. The resident council would be my suggestion for the first stage. But again, the reference that I made earlier to the chain of command, that has to be respected. It has to be, when I'm in the dining room and somebody says to me, well, I didn't like the meal the other night, so I went to Michelle about it. I cringe. I really do, because if you knew the responsibilities that Michelle bears on her shoulders day by day, and to have people jumping over the people who are legitimately responsible for really dealing with an issue, such as something in the dining room, as an example. It's just in order to have a well-ordered community, it's got to be on the line. You've got to show the respect. When I was a district administrator for a large school district, and people would come to me and say, I want to complain about a teacher, I would say, have you met with that teacher? No, I haven't met with that teacher. Well, have you met with that teacher's principal? No, I haven't met with that. Well, then you can't be meeting with me. You can, because that's a respect that has to be given. That's.
I think that's a very good question, and that is the process. Come to the residents' council. We have a liaison. Tamar speaks to the board, and we can introduce the subject through Tamar to the board. They respect her and respect yeah. Can you hear? Yeah, all right, just shift it again. Anyway, do come to the council meetings twice a month. Excuse me. Okay, one more question?
Wait, let me just say the
Oh.
first and third Thursdays at 10 a.m. in the classroom. Everyone is welcome.
Oh, it's so good. Needs an olive. I want to say thank you all for coming to our Residents Association meeting. Do appreciate team coming and sharing with us what their goals are. Our illustrious guests, Dick and Ray, thanks guys for doing this.
I just want to dispel one rumor. Now that I've lost weight, it is not true that even though there's a vague resemblance, I am not Tom Tango's father. That's
okay. With that, I call the committee is closed. That was good.
You guys.
Good question, Ronnie. Yes.